Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with the FIA manufacturers round number 4 at the Nürburgring GP track. So qualifying, this was my first lap in this session, driving obviously the Porsche 911 as that is the manufacturer I've picked. I decided to go for a strategy of doing two out laps, basically pitting on the second, after doing one out lap, pitting, new set of tyres, drive really slow, obviously medium tyres on, the softer the racing soft compound tyres on for qualifying, so doing a very slow 2 out laps and then trying to really go for it on this lap, obviously with the fresh tyres on, and everything's going okay. So you see the first sector over 3 tenths up from the current pole position time of a 1 minute 55.6 and pushing really well, doing an okay lap at this stage, hooking the corners up, going into the hairpin, braking reasonably well, a little bit deep into the corner, you can see running a little bit too far wide out on the exit, but managed to get on the power reasonably well and over 5 tenths up, nearly 6 tenths up on the current pole position lap. So this lap was heading for the way it's going, of 140, probably a 154.6 or 7 or something like that. That's what I expected to get. However, going into this corner, ran in too deep, trying to push too hard and got on the power on the curb, and this is disaster because now I'm in a very vulnerable position because I haven't set a lap. I've only got time to do one more lap. So going over the line, I went really slowly then to the finishing line because I didn't want to take any wear out the tyres. You can see they're already pretty worn. The best of these soft tyres is gone. So I've now got to do a lap that's fairly safe because I can't afford to start last in this race. I need to get at least some points in this race. So decided to take it not 100% on this lap, but still pushing reasonably hard because I wanted to be in the top 5 at least in qualifying. I didn't really expect to get all the way to pole. I didn't, with the pole lap that's there now, I thought I could get that, but I expected Oscar and the Infu to improve over that and do a better lap. So I knew it'd be a battle to get pole position really. But going through the first sector, just under 3 tenths up, so you can see I've lost a tenth already to the previous laps. The tyres just don't have the grip, but I really did a reasonably good first sector considering the tyres are in the state they are at the moment. But carrying on with the lap, going into the hairpin, trying to make sure I don't brake too deep. You can see braking fairly early, but that actually enables me to take quite a tight line to the apex, and I actually hold a better apex and get on the power reasonably well because obviously the tyres are a little bit worn, so I braked a little bit early. But now I'm a tenth up on the current pole position. However, I expected the tyre time to fade because obviously the tyres are really starting to be a little bit worn now. This is a third lap on these tyres. They're not in the condition they were when I messed up that lap at that point there. I think if I would have carried on that initial lap and hooked it up, I would have been in the mid to probably 54.5 to 6. However, still up on the sector, so I was really actually quite surprised that I'd managed to do this at this point with the worn tyres. And going into the hairpin, couldn't really risk pushing too hard. Obviously, had to just take it fairly safe because I couldn't afford to get a penalty with the fact that I haven't set a time yet. So going into the final corner and managing to hook that up reasonably well, getting on the power fairly early, not as early as I would have been able to with the fresher tyres, and over the line with a 155.2, and actually puts me pole position. So actually surprised myself there. So another pole position, and qualifying's definitely got a bit better since the initial start of the season. So starting from pole position, not a bad lap at all. Obviously a little bit disappointed that the first lap I messed that up because I think I would have been on pole position by quite a comfortable margin. However, I was a little bit worried because the Porsche isn't the best starting car. Now, I didn't know this before I picked this, and this is something I'm going to take into consideration for next season. But the Mercedes behind me, I know how good that is at starting. I've driven it. It's a good starting car. Now, the Aston Martin, I was not really sure about how that car starts because I've not really driven it much. I've never really raced with it. So I didn't really have much of an idea how that car was going to start in this race. So I knew I'd probably have to go defensive though because the Porsche is not a great start. It gets away okay off on the initial pull, but then because the gears are so long in the Porsche, first gear goes all the way up to 60. When you're hitting about, I think it's about between 15 and 30 miles per hour, it really does bog. It just doesn't have the acceleration there, but then it gets going. So it was really going to be a case of see if I can cover off that inside line as we work our way through the grid there. You see a lot of Mercedes in this race, a very strong car at this track. You watch myself in the previous think it was in the official season in the Nations when I actually won here in the Mercedes. That was it's such a nice car at this track. It's so well balanced. It creates a really nice balance between tyre wear. That's why it's so strong. It's really balanced through the first sector. I love the Mercedes. I actually think, for me personally, I preferred the Mercedes overall at this track because it's more balanced and a little bit easier to drive than the Porsche. The Porsche has a tendency to kick the rear end out a little bit more so than the Mercedes. However, this was a bit disappointing that the lobby wasn't so high, because I did this race straight after the World Tour event, and there was literally, I think, 2,100 points was up for grabs for the win, so a little bit disappointed that there wasn't a little bit more points up. But we've got Indian Food in here, a very fast driver, and this is going to be a good race, because obviously when you've got people like him, and also Machiavelli there in P3, also another very fast driver, starting right behind me. So the lights are about to go out. We're going to see how this race starts and see if we can get a good start. But straight away, you're going to see me go straight away to the right hand side. You can see me, I know straight away I've got to go defensive. However, just look at that Aston Martin. It's already alongside me and I cannot defend that inside line. So I decided to go to the right, to the left hand side, and try and go really deep into the corner. A little touch from Indian Food there where he's tapped me into it, but nothing sinister in that. It's just that obviously I tried to go really wide around the outside, and he's managed to hold on to that position. So a little bit disappointed, because I really wanted to get that P1 off the start and try and build up a lead, because I think for the Porsche to be in its element, it needs to be able to go through the corners flat out and then obviously pull a lead that way. But now I'm stuck behind the Aston Martin, which is actually quite a nice car at this track. I think I've driven this once at this track when the game first came out and when it was quite competitive. It does seem like quite a good race car. I don't think it's particularly amazing in terms of its hot lapping ability, but in terms of race speed and consistency, it's a nice car. I do remember actually having a good battle. It might be on one of my very early videos on the channel, having a really good battle with an Aston Martin when I was in a Porsche then. You can see now really close to Indian Food, putting him under a lot of pressure on this opening lap. Obviously I need to do that. I need to really harass the rear of his car, try and force him into an error and try and get past him as fast as possible, because the longer I stay behind him, the harder it's going to get, because he's going to know where I'm strong. And the Aston Martin, one thing about that car is it's a little bit faster down the straights than the Porsche. The Porsche is a little bit weak. I think the Aston Martin and the Mercedes, I think the Aston Martin's a little bit faster than the Mercedes, and the Mercedes is a little bit faster than the Porsche that I'm in. Because I remember doing a test at Monza when it was a top 24 race. I tested out what different speeds cars were at, and I think the Aston Martin was hitting a little bit more top speed than the Mercedes, but the Porsche was quite a bit down. It was about 2 miles per hour down on the Mercedes, I think, also. So I knew on the straights I was going to be a little bit vulnerable, but if I can get the slipstream, I might be able to make a move into this turn one. So picking up that slipstream, having a look down the right hand side, trying to stay with him. You see, getting the slipstream, but unfortunately, because of the lack of downforce when you're in the slipstream coming out the final corner, I just wasn't able to get on the power early enough. So going into turn one, had to brake a little bit early and nearly actually collected the rear of Oscar in the Food's car, but just managed to avoid him and stay on the track and not take him out. As you can see now, starting to build up a little bit of a lead to P3, starting to get him out of the slipstream and building that gap up to about 1.3, 1.4 seconds. So got that covered now for P3. It's now just about concentrating on P1 and seeing if I can battle and try and get past Indian Food at any place in this track. It's really going to be difficult. We know how good Oscar Indian Food is when he's in the rhythm, when he's driving well. He's one of the best. When he's driving really well, he's one of the fastest drivers you will come across on the game. He's very good. However, can we catch him and force him into an error? That is going to be the issue. Can we try and get him to make a mistake somewhere? Obviously, penalties could come into effect. This track is so severe for penalties. However, I felt fairly confident at keeping it in its limits. You saw me in the Mercedes. I think I only made one error when I was in that race on the chicane. Going into the pits is where I picked up a penalty. So I was fairly confident with this car. I could also do the same thing. Not much of a difference. I think overall the Mercedes and the Porsche very closely matched. I think possibly on a hot lap, over one lap, I think the Porsche is better than the Mercedes possibly. But I think in the race I would rather have the Mercedes, especially if it's a little bit more grunt down the straights than the Porsche. So going into the braking zone, you can see again, frustratingly not able to make a move into the chicane. Just that fraction short of him to really throw one up the inside. And you know, I'm not the type of driver that will make a risky overtake. I tend to play it quite, you say safe, but I play it quite as if it's a real race. You know, I don't want to cause damage to other people's cars, especially with, you know, maximum damage now on in these lobbies, in the FIA lobbies. We've got heavy damage on, And going over the line, an identical lap time between myself and this Moscow Indy Food, as we're going to look back on myself taking a much tighter line through that corner, really trying to harass the rear of his car and put him under pressure, force him into an area if I can. You can see through the corners, got a lot more grip and a lot more ability to carry speed, but then on the power, the Aston Martin's just the initial acceleration on low gears is just that little bit better than the Porsche. The Porsche just really does bog down, especially because first and second gear are really long-winded. They just carry on for ages. That's one thing. Obviously, if you had the ability to tune the cars, you could change the final gear and individual gears. However, with the default setup, it does make it a little bit difficult, and that is one reason why the Porsche is so good through the corners, though, especially long, fast corners, because it can just hold that gear for so long. But then on acceleration coming out of these corners, it's not so great. So going into the hairpin, you're going to see now really harassing the rear again. But then on the initial acceleration, the Aston Martin just pulls away. You can see it straight away. It starts to pull away, but then we're back in the slipstream, and then through these long, fast corners, able to stay with it and actually gain a bit now, because we've got the slipstream, we've got the extra downforce that this car kind of has over the Aston Martin, and it's just going to be a case of, can we make a move anywhere in this race? You can see the gap now building up to P3, so covered that P3 position off fairly early, and I felt like I could cover that off in terms of speed. The Porsche, although not as fast as the Mercedes, it's not massively slower. It's just a fraction slower than Mercedes, and then the Mercedes is a little bit slower than this Aston Martin. So again, trying to make sure we don't pick up a penalty as we come through to the chicane. You can see obviously Ascari in the food picked up a penalty on that first sector, running slightly wide out of turn 3, I think it was, on the right hand side, just running a little bit wide and picked up a penalty. So I think it was actually turn 2, sorry, classed as turn 2. But now we're still with no penalty. He's going defensive, trying to get rid of the slipstream, but obviously a little bit too close to him to really make that much of a difference. Getting a really big draft down the straight, but having to break that a little bit early because we have the loss of downforce and we're carrying that extra speed, but managing to stay so close to him through this section and really putting him under a lot of pressure. You can see in that top right hand corner on the replay camera just how close I am. I'm really trying to pressurize him. Maximum pressure can sometimes force someone into a mistake, and that seems like the only way I'm going to be able to get past this Aston Martin if he keeps driving as consistently as he is at this stage. He's holding the lines, he's driving well, he doesn't need to drive defensive, because I think he had faith that I wouldn't just throw one up the inside and make a stupid move, which kind of helps if you've got a driver behind that you know won't make a risky move. You don't really have to drive overly defensive. You just hold your line and just trust that they're not going to make a move. You can see having a little look, but again, I know I'm too far back, so I'm not going to go throw one up the inside there. It looks like he tried to cover that line off, actually, as I say that, but maybe he's just in case going on that inside line. But again, having a look on the outside, trying to get a widest line possible into the fast section, and just not able to really get close enough into the braking zones to launch one up the inside. You need to be in a position to make a move safely. You can't just throw one up there and hope that they see it coming. It's not my style. I like to do things as if it was a real race, and at this stage, not really been in that position to do that so far. But you can see really trying to put him under pressure, making sure that if there is an error from him, I can capitalise. As you can see just in the distance there, just in the distance, Mercedes holding on about 2 seconds back, and again going into braking. Really, I'm starting to get held up a little bit at this stage when the tyre wear is kicking in. I don't know if the Aston Martin was a little bit harsher on the tyres, but through the corners I felt like I could carry more speed. I felt like I had more overall pace each lap, and I think if I would have got away from the start, I think I might have been able to build the lead up and possibly break the slipstream. I don't know. It would have been hard, obviously, with the speed that the Aston Martin has, but the advantage the Porsche has is just faster through the corners than the Aston Martin. So maybe it would have been possible. It would have been interesting to see, but at this point, I just can't find a way past. And this is one of the reasons why I love GT Sport, though, and racing games in general, sim racing, is when it's like this. You're behind someone and you just don't have the speed in your car, but you're holding on. It feels really realistic. Battling with someone who's really fast on the game and just trying to find a way past. You can see me taking alternative lines on some corners, having a look on the inside, just trying to make sure he knows that I'm there, and if he makes a mistake, he knows that I'm going to capitalise on that. So this is why I love GT Sport, and this reminds me very much of a race I had a long time ago on GT Sport at Brands Hatch in the Group 4 cars. Very similar, faster car in front on the straights, but I was in the handling car, and through the corners I had more speed. You can see able to take much tighter line through that corner, but then as soon as we got the power, he's able to build that lead up just enough to keep himself safe into the next braking zone. And the thing about the next braking zone, it's quite a fast corner, so you can't just launch it up the inside. You know, it's not a second gear corner, it's like a third gear corner that's quite fastly paced. You can see going through there and then trying to get the line onto the back straight. And this is the thing, going through these corners, being so close to Indian Food, the loss of downforce then means you can't get on the power as early as he can coming out the exit. And then we go into the chicane, which again is the only real breaking point, but because of the lack of power, I just cannot get close enough. And this is really you know, intense drive, and both of us really on the limit. The tyre wear is starting to kick in. I think we all ran the softer compound tyre as we go into the pits. And I go into the pits about 6 tenths behind. You can see there, about 5-6 tenths behind. And this is going to be the issue again. As we come out the pits, you're going to see, I think I lose a couple of attempts possibly to Indian Food because of the gears again, because obviously when you pull away, the first gear's that bit longer, and it doesn't pull as much as the other cars. So be interesting to see the gap as we come out the pits and we've put the new tyres on. So again, the soft compound tyres, and you can see it's gone up to nearly 9 tenths of a second, and it's nearly a second by the time we get to the braking zone. So he's broke the slipstream through the pit stop because his car accelerates that little bit better in first gear. So this is really some things we need to be paying attention to when we pick a car, because it can make the difference in terms of, you know, where you come out the pits, how safely you come out the pits. And now I've got to try and concentrate, because I was a little bit frustrated obviously that I've lost time. I made an error on turn 1 also, where I was trying to make up for the lost time in the pits and lost even more time. And actually now I think P3 is getting close to my slipstream as well, because I've made a few errors. And this is another thing that I do struggle with. You've probably seen it on so many videos. When we put the fresh tyres on, it takes me a little bit of time to get back used to going from such worn tyres to the fresher tyres. It's one thing I wish they'd do is obviously keep the tyre wear a bit more realistic, but I don't think they're ever going to do that. They seem to like doing this really high exaggerated tyre wear, which isn't very realistic. And it would be nicer if they did a slightly longer race and lowered the tyre wear down and made it a bit more of a predictable rate of loss with the grip. But that it is what it is, and I don't think they're going to change that. I mean, the thing is, they have the ability to force a pit stop. It would be interesting if they did do a lower tyre rate, whether, you know, people would risk taking the new tyres or just hold on with the slightly worn tyres, and, you know, maybe a 5 second shorter pit stop, as long as they started us on lower fuel, so we had to pit for fuel as well. It'd be interesting. I think, as you can see again there, Indian Food picking up a penalty. He's now 1.5 seconds ahead, and this was a really scruffy outlap. I was really not driving too well on this outlap. A lot of errors, and I've actually given the slipstream. You can see now just 7 tenths behind. There's a Mercedes behind me who I was actually covering off fairly comfortably in the earlier laps, but now I'm really just not hooking it up. I just couldn't really get in the rhythm again, and I really had to start concentrating on getting back used to getting the corners hooked up, hitting the apexes, and see if I can start making some headway back in on Oscar in the Food. So managing to close a bit back up for him through the early stages of this lap, so starting to get a bit better, but still not really driving as well as I would have liked. It is frustrating when you're not really hooking up your first opening few laps on the fresh tyres, because they're the laps that you should really be hitting, you know, fastest laps of the race. And at the moment I'm only slightly up on my earlier laps when the race started, when I had a lot more fuel on board. So not doing a great job on these opening 2 laps, but now it seems to have levelled the gap off to Oscar in the Food at about 1.4 seconds. So at least I'm getting back into some sort of rhythm, and now I've just got to make sure that I do not let that Mercedes get too close to me, and try and drive a little bit more consistently and try and put some better sectors in to increase the gap to P3 and make grounds on that P1, and, you know, driving P1, because I wanted to get back in the slipstream so I could put him under pressure towards the end of the race. Obviously only a few laps to go. These races are a little bit shorter this season on the FIA season. They seem to have made them 1 lap shorter, and they've got rid of obviously the fueling, but then they brought into effect the pit stops with the exaggerated tyre wear and the lower the softer compound tyres as well. As again, going into the braking zone through the chicane, 1.4 seconds behind, so you can see the gap staying very static to P1, and now I've just got to try and concentrate on losing P3 out of that slipstream and hooking up this final corner so that he can't pick up too much of a slipstream, that he makes a move going into turn 1. As we look on the top right hand corner, you can see He's really following my slipstream as much as possible. I didn't want to start weaving around because I don't want to lose time to P1. I could see that he was over half second off, and I felt he's not going to throw one up the inside there. I know this guy. I've seen him racing before. I know that he's not going to make a stupid move. So 7, I managed to actually gain a little bit of time out of that really slow right-hand corner and get the gap up to 8 tenths. This is where the Porsche tends to be able to gain some time over the Mercedes behind me. Maybe it's just both different driving styles, because I actually liked the Mercedes through that section when I was driving it, but actually managed to gain another 2 tenths on Indian Food now. So I started to think it might be possible to get that slipstream back and put him under pressure, because he seems to be struggling again. He's obviously got that 1.9 seconds worth of penalty, so maybe the pressure's getting to him now. He obviously knows he's got a penalty, and I'm very close to picking that slipstream up again, just over a second behind him, only 1.1 seconds behind. And now I've got to really start putting the lap time in and hooking these corners up, because if I can pick that slipstream up, it's going to be so close on this final lap, as just 1 second away from P1. So managed to really get back in this race. You can see lost the slipstream now from P3, and starting to hook the corners back up and get back into a rhythm, and starting to feel like I've got a chance of winning this race again. As you can see, going through these corners, under 1 second the gap to P1, but the power of the Aston Martin, will it drag himself out of the slipstream again as we go into this race? Just over, you can see there, nearly 9 tenths of a second, and you can see his car pulling away, even though I am picking up a little bit of a slipstream, and it's nearly at a second. Is it going to reach a second? So I am getting a slight benefit from that, but he's managed to still get out the slipstream. However, he's gone into the chicane too deep, and that's given me the chance to really pick up the slipstream now, as I'm now got a full, within half a second of him, and that's the range where you start getting the effect of the slipstream. So he's still got to get rid of that 1.8 seconds, 1.9 seconds worth of penalty. As we look back on myself, going on to the final lap of this race now, I'm really, you can see me following that car, trying to get every bit of slipstream as I can, and then go around the outside as he looks to try and get rid of some of his slipstream very early on, but that enables me then to get even more of his slipstream. So this is going to get really close as we go into the final lap, and we've also got P3 closing in as we're now battling for P1 in this race. And you can see starting to get a little bit held up again as his tyres are wearing off. So the Porsche tyre wear seems to be favouring it towards the end of the race, as I'm able to get a lot of grip out of these corners compared to the Aston Martin. But again, just not able to get close enough to throw one up the inside. You can see going into this corner, not close enough to make a move there. It's not really an overtaking place, too risky there. The next overtaking move is coming out of this corner, so you can see I really tried to get on the power early, managed to gain the gap and get it much shorter. You can see visually now how close that gap is, but again, not able to make the move. So I decided not even to try and go down the inside. I just wanted to make sure I keep getting clean exits, because I know the main overtaking opportunity that I'm going to get is going into the very tight chicane, and that's really the only place I'm going to be able to make a move. That's now following Oscar in the food. You can see, I don't know how this has happened, but his car is really damaged, and I was so baffled at this because I haven't seen him make a mistake. Look how much scratches and dints and stuff he's got all over his car. I was really confused by that. I don't know whether it's something to do with the livery he's using, but then I think he's just using the default livery, so I was really confused why his car was looking like that. Anyway, as we go now into turn 1, are we going to be able to get a slipstream? We've got a slipstream. He's going to try and get rid of his penalty. I decided to try and go around the outside, hang it around the outside, and he cuts me off a bit there. I was a little bit frustrated at that, because I thought he was going to get rid of all of his penalty and then maybe try and see if he can get behind me, but he decided to get rid of some of it and then cut me up a little bit, which was a little bit rude, but I think he obviously wanted the win, and then he's got rid of the rest of his penalty and managed to get the win. I nearly actually lost P2 because I had to back out of it so much when he tried to get rid of that penalty in the left-hand side. So a little bit frustrating for me. I felt like if he was going to, I thought he was getting rid of all of his penalty as he went to the left, and he didn't. He only got rid of a bit and then cut me up a bit, but no hard feelings towards him. It was a great race, really enjoyable battle. All the way to the finishing line. I tried to put him under pressure, really again at the end, managed to put him under a lot of pressure, nearly made that move, but he just cut me off a little bit towards the, I would have liked a little bit more room so I could at least take the corner a bit better, but unfortunately I didn't get that, and he comes away with the win. But a really fun race, a good battle. I wasn't able to really use the full speed of the 911 obviously with the car in front. I managed to get back into the slipstream again after obviously losing it at the start, so the speed was definitely there in the Porsche, just not really able to use it once I was really close to P1. So come away with P2 and just over 2,000 points, so not a disaster result, not a bad result considering obviously the split was not the highest. So still a solid round and solid points. We'll have a look at the really only two incidents in the race. Was the start where the Porsche just didn't get a good start, tried to go defensive but just not able to do it, so I gave him the space, tried to go really deep into the braking zone and hold it around the outside, and a little bit of contact there which pushed me a little bit wide, but again not really anything to complain about. We're both battling at the start of the race. Contact like that I don't mind at the start of the race, you know, it's the dive bombing that I really don't like. But this was going into the final corner where he tries to, I see he's getting rid of his penalty, so I go around the outside, but he's obviously just realised that if he does that he's going to lose the lead, and then he decides to stop it and then just cuts me up a little bit on the apex of the corner. So that was a little bit frustrating, but still a great result, and you know, a great race, enjoyable race all the way to the finishing line between all three drivers there, the Mercedes, a Porsche and an Aston Martin. So it's good to see three different cars and all battling to the finishing line. So a really fun race to be involved with. I hope you enjoyed that video. I'm going to be back with more streaming, more videos uploaded also. I'm going to try and get a track guide for the St. Croix. You might have seen me streaming before. I literally have no idea with that track where to go. So I'm going to learn that tonight. I won't be streaming that. I'm going to learn it without streaming, just concentrate on the track, get it learned, and try and get a good enough time tonight to do a track guide tomorrow. And I'm going to try and get a track guide out tomorrow. Also, I'm going to try and possibly stream tomorrow. I'm not too sure. Hopefully I can stream tomorrow and get the track guide done, so it's another 2 uploads, kind of, obviously the stream and then do the upload later in the day, because then as long as I get the upload out before the race on Wednesday, that's the main thing. I might also try and get a track guide done for the nations as well, so do a one video with both done on the one video. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that video. Hope you enjoyed the race. Thoroughly enjoyable all the way to the end. Make sure you give it a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed, and hit that notification button so you don't miss any videos. I do try and upload and stream as much as possible now, so make sure you check the streams out as well. Thanks again for watching, everyone.